In July 2016, Tanisha Harris was strangled and bludgeoned by her husband, Pastor Robert Harris. In March 2017, Gregory Green shot his wife, Faith Green, in the foot, slashed her face, he tied her up, then proceeded to murder his 2 children and 2 stepchildren viciously in front of her, their mother, before shooting her in the head, all because she threatened to separate from him. She survived. 29-year-old Sabrina Rosario was shot by her husband, 31-year-old Jose Valdeva, along with their 4 children, ages 3, 5, 9, and 11. All died, but her 11-year-old son survived. In the end, her husband Jose shot himself, making this a murder-suicide. All 3 of these families were shattered and destroyed by an abusive father, partner, and lover. When we hear of these tragic stories, we often think it's so far from us, like it can never happen. But it's actually more common than you could imagine. And each and every one of these women had pre-warning to the dangers that had taken place. In this short video, we'll be going over what domestic violence is, the warning signs and red flags of an abusive partner, why women of faith are more likely to become victims, and how to break the cycle of violence in our homes and prevent yourself from becoming a victim early on. I'm Millicent Starnes, author, victims' rights advocate, and survivor myself. I too have been in abusive relationships. However, mine were more on the lines of sexual and emotional abuse, but I had no clue that they were on their way to becoming physical. Back in 2013, I answered the call to help women survivors, but I wasn't sure at the time why God asked me. Then one day, I was at a young lady's funeral. Her boyfriend had shot and murdered her while she was pregnant with his baby. The funeral was heartbreaking. As I watched her children walk up to view their mother's body in the casket, my eyes filled up with tears. I then heard God say to me, "This would have been you, but you listened. And now I want to use you to help other women out there who need help and direction out of abusive situations." Soon after I heard the Lord's voice, I remembered a relationship I was in. I was no more than 19 years old. I had no children. I was young and free. And I was in a relationship with a classmate of mine from high school. We were always together and things were on the up and up. But then I began to notice some strange behaviors from him. I would go to work and come home to find I had over 100 missed calls from him. At first I thought maybe something was wrong, but when I called, he would just say he was making sure I was home safe. I thought it was strange, but I also appreciated it because I had never had anyone who cared so much, so I thought. I didn't think anything of it anymore, but I continued to see him and continued to notice more odd behavior. He would take my expensive makeup bags and throw it away, and he was jealous at times. For some of you, this may not be much of a sign at all, but it is. I must admit, I didn't see it as abuse. He never hit me, he never pushed me in any type of way, so I never thought I was in danger. Then one day, my mother came to me with a concerned look to her face. She looked terrified, and she told me she had a horrendous dream of me being murdered, and her message to me was, "Please be careful who you're around." The way she looked at me was a face I'll never forget to this day, but I knew it was a message. And that weekend alone, 2 other persons, including a stranger off the street, gave me the same warning, and I knew something was about to happen. I didn't know who because I wasn't hanging with a lot of people. I spent most of my time alone with my boyfriend, but I never even suspected him, nor did I think all that strange behavior was a red flag. I just knew something was about to happen. So I did something I never did before. I trusted the message, and for no reason besides the warning. I chose to break things off with my boyfriend. I decided at that time just to focus on myself, but in the back of my head, I was hoping I wasn't making a mistake. But I would rather be safe than sorry, I thought, because this was getting pretty scary. Interestingly, the warning stopped. Several weeks went by, and I happened to attend a get-together at an old classmate's home. And she mentioned how she'd seen my ex-boyfriend's ex-wife at the grocery store. She mentioned how he beat her up. In fact, he beat her up so badly that she was placed in the hospital and charges were filed on him. Then Instantly, a light switch went off in my mind, and the warnings, the dreams of death, all made sense. I knew that God was protecting me from him, and I didn't see it coming. I didn't realize how moving in faith and obedience is what had kept me alive, and many years after, I still had lots of questions. However, when I became an advocate and attended trainings on the subjects of violence against women, I realized even further that I was in an abusive relationship, but I had never known it the whole time. I've had my times of disobedience and I've fallen, but now I'm able to use my stories so that others know the importance of listening to the inner voice, God's voice, when he's speaking to us about the people we love. I then later found out that the young lady who passed away had a dream prior to her murder that her boyfriend killed her.
The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner deemed the deaths of LaRonda and Eric Jones a murder-suicide.
That's crazy. That's like scary.
LaRonda shot 3 times in the head, neck, and torso while lying in bed here at her condo on Perkins Avenue in Waterbury on November 21st.
You know, it's so quiet, nobody even heard that.
It's where she lived with her husband, Eric Jones, a retired New Haven police detective and former school resource officer. After killing his wife, he turned the gun on himself.
These deaths are often very much preventable.
Margaret Rosa is the Associate Director of Safe Haven. They help victims of domestic violence break the cycle before it's too late. In Jones' case, there were no signs that anything was wrong in the relationship.
They were quiet people, like, you would have never thought that.
Rosa says quiet sometimes isn't a good thing.
Typically, people do feel once they are in a domestic violence situation, they feel very alone.
On Monday, a woman was shot by her husband in Dawson County. It happened at a fire station in the parking lot after she drove there with her 2 young kids.
15-year-old Jenna Hewitt and 51-year-old Matthew Chaplin were shot and killed early Sunday morning at a home near Providence Country Club. The gunman, 23-year-old John Bosick, met Chaplin's 16-year-old daughter on Instagram back in January. She says he wanted to be in a relationship and wouldn't take no for an answer.
With the death of Pitt student Alina Shaheed. She was found dead in her off-campus apartment on Sunday. Police say that Darby brutally beat her with a claw hammer and 2 knives.
Dead is 27-year-old Brittany Bailey. Police say her husband, 34-year-old Giovanni Bailey, shot and killed her because they were in the middle of some sort of dispute that began at her job in Plainfield.
I saw her this morning at work, and I told her not to come back to this house. And she called me Santi, because I'm like her auntie. And her sister-in-law. She said, Santi, everything good. I said, Brittany, don't go back to that house.
Sadly, she ignored that advice.
Brent was shot 4 times by her husband in front of their children before he turned the gun on himself. She said he'd never been physically violent before, but was emotionally abusive. Here are some warning signs. If your partner tries to isolate you or tell you who you can and can't see. Grant says abuse can often start as a control issue and then escalate to violence. 2 years ago, the CDC issued a report on female murder victims. The numbers were shocking. It showed more than half, 55%, died as a result of domestic abuse, primarily from their male partners. Black and Native American women were killed at a rate that was 2.5 times that of white or Asian women. Black and Native American women were killed at a rate that was 2.5 times that of white or Asian women.
Because women are regarded as second-class citizens, and our society has no real interest in dealing with the issues that affect them.
1 in every 3 women will experience domestic violence in her lifetime. Pause. Just think. I want you guys to close your eyes and think of 3 women you know. 1 of them has experienced or is experiencing domestic violence. A woman is beat every 9 seconds in the U.S. 85% of domestic violence victims are women. And women who are victims of domestic violence are 8 times more likely to be killed by an intimate partner if there are firearms in the home. Domestic violence is a global problem that affects 35% of women worldwide. Globally, around 137 women are killed by their partner or family members every day. And women between the ages of 15 and 44 are at a higher rate of rape and domestic violence than cancer, car accidents, malaria, or being injured in war. Now, when we think of domestic violence, what is the first thing that you think of? For most of us, the first thing we think of when we hear domestic abuse is punching, hitting, and kicking, right? And beating, right? And that is actually one of the most common forms of it. However, a lot of people don't understand that there's other forms. You have emotional and sexual abuse as well. Now, emotional abuse, a lot of people don't understand that it's just as damaging as physical, except for the difference with emotional, it affects you psychologically. How do you know if your partner is potentially an abusive person? Great question. Abusers always have a way of telling on themselves. If you pay lots of attention to how they move, what they say, and their history, you will be able to spot them on pretty easy. These things are called red flags. Red flags are those little things and unexplained feelings about something or someone that just doesn't feel right. Paying attention to red flags are vital. You may be dealing with an abusive person if they exhibit the following behaviors. Control. Abusers will get angry if you're late coming back from the store or an appointment. He may ask you closely about where you went or whom you spoke to. As the behavior progresses, he may not allow you to make personal decisions about your home, children, clothing, makeup, or even attending church. He may keep all your money or even suggest you ask for permission to leave the house or room. Jealousy. At the beginning of the relationship, the abusers will say to you, jealousy is a sign of love. Jealousy has nothing to do with love. According to the scriptures, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 1, it mentions that love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. So jealousy is a sign of possessiveness and a lack of trust, not love. The abuser may question you about who you talk to, accuse you of flirting with other people on social media or even in person. He may accuse you of having an affair or being jealous of the time you spend with family, friends, or even your children. And then a lot of times abusers begin to isolate you. As the jealousy progresses, he may call you frequently during the day or drop by unexpectedly. He may refuse to let you work for fear you'll meet someone else, or even begin behaviors such as checking your car mileage or asking your friends or families to watch you. Quick involvement. A large number of abused women dated or knew their abusers for less than 6 months before they were engaged, married, or living together. He will pressure you to commit to the relationship in such a way that you may feel guilty or that you're letting him down. He expects a perfect wife, perfect mother, lover, and friend. The abuser will say such things as, if you love me, or I'm all you need, and you're all I need. The abuser expects you to take care of everything emotionally and in the home. Oftentimes, he blames others for his problems. If he's chronically unemployed, someone is always doing him wrong or out to get him, he may make mistakes and then blame you for upsetting him and keeping him from concentrating on the task at hand. And he may even blame you for anything that goes wrong in his life, period. So blame is another common sign. Hypersensitivity. This is one of the most common signs, along with jealousy, as we spoke about earlier. Hypersensitivity with an abuser it means that he is easily insulted, claiming his feelings are hurt, when in actuality, he's angry or taking the slightest setback as a personal attack.
Hey, come on, take a break. Take a break? What you talking about, take a break? I ain't got no time to take a break. I got to work, man. I got to write these songs. Me about these songs for 6 months. You know how much money I owe Sue Records?
What you mean, owe Sue Records? Much as we were? They always giving you stacks of cash whenever we do a show. I know I don't spend it.
Oh, no? But what about what all them wigs and wardrobe and whatnot you got in the back there, huh? What about the way you got this place decked out, huh? All this furniture, that fish tank. I got to pay the girls and I got to pay the band. And on top of that, I'm trying to build us a studio.
You know you want the studio.
And I'd have it by now You sing the songs the way I tell you to sing them, Anna Mae. God dang.
That's what I've been trying to do, right? I mean, but they all sound like the same, you know?
What? I ain't hear you. What you say? I ain't hear you. I ain't hear you. What you say?
I said, I mean, not exactly, you know?
He would rant and rave about the injustices of things that have happened, things that are just a part of living. For an example, being asked to work late or getting a traffic ticket or being told about his annoying behavior. Cruelty to children or animals. Abusers may expect children to be capable of things beyond their capabilities. He may tease children until they cry. He may not want children to eat at the table or may expect them to be kept in their rooms when he is home. He may punish animals brutally or be insensitive toward their pain or suffering. Verbal abuse. In addition to saying things that are intentionally meant to be cruel and hurtful, verbal abuse is also apparent in the abuser's degrading of his partner, cursing her, belittling her, and her accomplishments. And this goes along with emotional abuse, as we spoke about earlier. Most abusers have that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde personality. The abuser keeps you confused by sudden changes in his mood. You may believe you may believe he has some sort of mental problem because one minute he's loving and the next minute he's exploding. Explosiveness and moodiness are typical of men who beat their partners. As mentioned earlier, previous abusive relationships, as we talked about, the abuser, another main sign is the previous abusive relationships. The abuser may say he has hit women in the past, but he may blame his ex for him abusing her. He'll say things like, oh, she made me do it, or whatever. His relatives or ex-partners may warn you that he is abusive. Please, ladies, do not ignore this message. An abuser will abuse any woman he is with if the relationship lasts long enough for the violence to be introduced. That domestic violence is a complicated process. It's not always easy, and it grasps you. It's like it easily pulls you in because it's so deceptive. It's you got to remember, domestic violence is slow and pervasive. It usually happens over time. Now, every now and then, you may see somebody that portrays these behaviors when you first meet them. But usually it takes time. And so I'm going to go through with you guys the cycles so that you can understand how it works. So usually with domestic violence, the first phase that we'll see is the seduction phase. And this is when you typically meet the abuser, or this is the beginning stages of the relationship. And the abuser, he's charming and he's caring and he's taking you out on these nice dates, and he's telling you things that no other man told you, like, oh, I can see myself being with you one day, and you're so beautiful, you're the most beautiful woman I've ever been with. And don't get me wrong, these are great things, right? But as you get to know them, you go from the seduction phase and easily into the tension building phase. Now, this is the phase, you remember I talked to you guys about emotional abuse? Well, this is where the emotional abuse starts to take place. So a lot of times, every relationship has their ups and downs. It's just natural. You're going to have your disagreements. But with an abuser, you remember we talked about walking on the eggshells and they're oversensitive? So it could be something like, you didn't make dinner right, or you, like I said, came home late from work, and it leads to an argument. Well, the argument will go from being a disagreement to an argument to yelling and blaming, and keep screaming, and you're just like, okay, it wasn't that big of a deal, or whatever. This is that phase. So as that goes on, and that tension building phase can last for a long time, up to years, then we start to see them go from tension building to abusive. Now, at this point, tensions are going to start to escalate, and they get worse with time. The abuser is beginning to get out of control. Now you start to see him when he's angry, break things. Maybe he broke your TV. Maybe he kicked the door down. Maybe he came into your house, stole all your items. You know, and then a lot of times it goes from that to threats, and the threats become physical. Maybe he hit you. Maybe he spit on you. Maybe he choked you, you know? And so victims usually during this phase, they survive. But what they have is, you know, it went from the tension where it was emotional to now physical, which, you know, you may experience broken bones and you may have bruises.
Wrong style, what's wrong?
A lot of times at that abusive phase, especially when it first happens, you're shocked. You can't believe that the person that you love would do something like this. You can't believe the person that was so caring, that was a part of the community, that brought you roses and told you that he would not hurt you, is doing this to you. And so let's say that you're in a relationship and, you know, you and your boyfriend got in a heated argument and he lost control and he punched you in your face. And it happened so fast and so unexpectedly, you were shocked. You guys got in an argument, he punched you, you tell him to leave, he eventually leaves, right? And you're mad. You have made up in your mind that you were done, because you don't play that with nobody hitting you, right? You're done. You're fed up. You're not gonna allow it to happen. So you block him. You block him because you notice that he starts calling you again. You block him, and then he comes by the house in about a week later. And you don't want to talk to him. Now, typically, the abuser doesn't give up. The abuser is going to keep coming back. The abuser is going to come back. And when he comes back, he's going to come back sorry. Now, that's where we enter the next phase, which, you guys, you have to excuse me. I made a mistake here on the slide. But this is the reconciliation / honeymoon phase, where the abuser maybe, you know, he comes apologetically, and maybe he comes back and he's just like, baby, I'm sorry. I don't know what got into me. You know, I wasn't raised this way. I've never hit a woman before. And maybe he starts to agree to counseling, and, you know, he's willing to do, so he says, whatever he can to make things work. And you want to believe it because you love him. So he will show you, you know, he will shower you with gifts and dates, and you guys are now having the greatest sex ever, and it's, the passion is high, and you're feeling on cloud 9 again. But the way that cycles of violence happen is that honeymoon phase, that reconciliation phase, it feels so high and good. But with abuse, it will be a cycle, and it will turn right back on to the tension building phase and right back to the abusive phase. And it goes on and on and on. As a matter of fact, you know, most victims of abuse will go back and forth to their abuser 7 to 13 times before they leave for good. Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well out there, and I thank you for tuning in this evening. As you all know, it's domestic violence. So tonight, I'm super excited to say that we have a special guest with us. She's my favorite domestic violence advocate, powerful speaker, Pamela Morrow. Hi, Pamela.
Hello. How are you?
I'm great, and it's always great to see you, and it's an honor to have you here with us this evening. So can you start, can you share us a little bit about your story?
I want people to know that I am a domestic violence advocate who advocate on behalf of children who witness domestic violence in the home. So I'm here tonight to share my story with you and with your onlookers about what I experienced growing up in a home where domestic violence ran rampant. At the age of 8, my 2 sisters, who was 9 and 6, we sat in my mother's bedroom after her boyfriend had broken into her house and stabbed her 13 times, and he killed my mother that night. So I advocate on behalf of children who witness the same things in the home. And when you say in your introduction, I heard you say that 1 in 4 women, they are now saying 1 in 3, deal with domestic violence or are victims of domestic violence. 1 in 7 men are victims of domestic violence. And even when you go online, Millicent, and you read these statistics, you read about the 1 in 4 women, you read about the 1 in 7 men, but in that same paragraph, it says nothing about the children who witness domestic violence in the home. And so I started to take notes when I learned what domestic violence was. Somebody walked up to me, I was at an event, just went to go with a friend, and I was at an event this one night for domestic violence, and someone asked me why I was there. And I said, I'm just here to support. And we began to have a conversation, and I began to share with them, oh yeah, well, my mom died when, I was a kid. And the more I began to share my story with this person, the more she began to educate me on what had actually happened. And she said, your mom didn't just die. Your mom was killed, and it was due to domestic violence. And I'm like, domestic violence, like, what is that? I never heard the word, but I'm like one of those people who love to learn. So it kind of pushed me to learn more about the subject. And in my learning, it was like, oh my goodness, like I have got to do something about the children who are witnessing this stuff. And these children who I don't want to say they're forgotten about, but it's kind of like they're overlooked because they still have to go to school. We still had to go to school. We still had to make good grades. Our teachers were expecting us to be the ideal students and all of this kind of stuff. But meanwhile, they're dealing with all of this in their home. And so I'm like, okay, somebody has to be a voice for them. And so that's why I choose to advocate on behalf of the children.
Tell us a little bit about your mother.
My mother was amazing. And I'm sure that most people will say that about their mother. Her name was Rebecca. She married early, she divorced early, and she died early. My mother was an amazing singer. That's one of the things that I remember most about my mom, is that she could sing really, really good. And she was always singing. Like, I can remember people actually bring in, if you can remember, like the handheld tape recorders, like the old ones where you had to mash play and rewind, and people would actually bring their tape recorders to our house, and we would sit on the porch, and my mom would just sing for the neighborhood while she was braiding our hair. And she was amazing. She was interesting. But one thing about her is she made sure that we knew that she loved us.
Yes. Okay.
But I have a special place in my heart for children who are dealing with this, because I was one.
The children are affected in so many ways. Mentally, a lot of times, the victims that we see today were the children of yesterday who had to watch their parents get
absolutely.
And
that's one of the questions I get asked all the time, and people say, well, are you a victim? Were you ever victimized when you grew up, when you started with relationships? Were you a victim? Did you ever get hooked up with the wrong person, someone who was an abuser? And then people are always asking me, when you were witnessing this, did you know that it was wrong? What did you feel? Like, yes, I knew that it was wrong. I felt the same thing that any child, any person would feel, standing there watching your mom beaten, slapped around, kicked, saw my mom's tooth knocked out of her mouth. She was hit that hard.
Sending emergency. Sending emergency.
My mommy and daddy are having a fight.
Is she hitting her?
What? I'm talking to the police, Mommy. Stop it! Mommy! Stop it! Don't take the baby! Stop it! You're gonna hurt the baby! Stop it! Could you just send the police, please?
Okay, we're gonna be there. We're taking your baby.
Stop it! No! Oh! Shut up!
Let me talk to you. Where's your mom?
What?
What's going on?
They're having a fight because this has been going on forever and ever. They always have this because he has a cousin. He's always drinking beer and getting drunk. And Mom.
What's his name? What is his name? Your father's name?
Pierre.
Pierre?
Yeah.
What's his last name?
I don't know, but I think his name.
Is he white, black, or Hispanic?
He's black.
He's your father?
He's my stepfather.
Okay, how old is he?
I don't know.
Does he have any weapons?
No. But he's hurting Mommy.
How's he hurting her?
He made his Mommy.
Okay, don't cry. We're going to send the police.
Okay.
Okay, now where's your mother at right now?
She's in the room fighting with them.
Do you have a little baby sister?
No, I got baby brother.
Is he trying to take your baby brother?
Baby.
And he's trying to take your baby?
Yeah, because Mama's not drunk. He thinks he's drunk because he can't say nothing because he's drunk. My stepdaddy's drunk.
Are they in a room fighting? Where are they at now?
They're in the room still.
They're in the bedroom?
Yeah, I don't want him to do nothing strange with the baby because if they drop, he's a newborn baby. He's very delicate.
What do you mean do anything strange? What do you think he's going to do to your baby?
I think he's going to take the baby and do something because he's drunk. He might not see the baby and go off without the baby if he takes it.
How old are you?
I'm 6 and my little sister's 4.
You're 6-year-old? You're 6?
Yeah, I'm in first grade. My sister's in kindergarten.
Okay, what is your name? What is your name?
Lisa. My sister's name is Drea. Excuse me.
You only... Okay.
Okay, could you just send the police?
Yeah, they're on their way, but I'm going to keep you on the line until they get there, okay? Is your front door open?
Oh, no.
Okay, you go unlock it and come back to the phone so the officers can get in?
Just wait, please.
Okay.
He just knocked my sister out.
What sister that he knocked out?
My little sister.
Your
the 4-year-old.
What do you mean he knocked her off?
He pushed her down on the floor. And he cried. I wish he would stop doing this. Ever since he had him, Pierre just slapped Mommy.
Which room are they in?
My mom's name is Cindy.
Okay, which room are they in?
They're in, that room.
They're in the back room or the bedroom?
The back. Oh my God!
What's the matter?
Something happened! Just wait for the police! Wait, I want to go see what happened, please!
Okay, the police are on their way, okay? Hello? Lisa?
My stepdaddy's got the baby now.
He has the baby now. Where is he at now?
What?
Lisa, where is he at right now? Is he still in the house?
He's still in the room and got the baby.
Okay.
And he made some red marks on Mama's, on his neck.
He did what?
He made some red marks on Mama's.
Where did he make the red marks on with her neck?
On her neck. On the right side. Very dark. My mom's going outside. Mama, go! The police are coming.
Is your mother? Hello?
You know, like, my feelings, the children's, what they're feeling is no different from what the adult is feeling. The only thing about it is that we are experiencing this without any clue on how to handle it. What can we do? How can we get past this or get out of it? You don't think about things like that as children, because we just want to go outside and play and ride our bikes and, you know, play with our dolls and play with my sisters. And now I'm in a position where I am forced now to try to figure out some adult things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was gonna be my next question. Well, one of the questions later on was, did you see that? You know, did you see it happen? Did you see him abuse her prior to this unfortunate event that happened with your mother? And so,
oh, absolutely, absolutely. You know, Millicent, if you were to ask me what was my favorite dish that my mom fixed, or how often we had, you know, an amazing Sunday dinner, I couldn't tell you, because I don't remember ever having Sunday dinner or sitting at the table and having dinner. But if you were to ask me, how many times did I see my mom hit? How many times did I see her slap? How many times did I not just see her hit and slap? I saw her head go through the wall. I saw her stabbed multiple times. By the age of 6, Millicent, hear me, I had literally mastered the art of removing stitches from my mom with nothing more than tweezers and a razor blade.
oh my goodness.
At the age of 6. At the age of 6, my sisters and I were forced to walk through a creek, not knowing how to swim, never having lessons, never really even been swimming. But the only way that we can get my mom to safety was to walk through this creek while holding her up, because she had been beaten, she had been stabbed, she had literally been left on the floor for dead. 6. My youngest sister, 4. My oldest sister, 7. Can you imagine? There's 8 million children. They said that there's anywhere from 6 to 8 million children right now, today, in this country who witness domestic violence in the home. And some of them are seeing the very things that we saw when we were children and we witnessed it in the home. There's so many children who are traumatized, and they're getting labels because they go to school and they act out what they're seeing in the home. And so now it's like, oh, they're bad kids. They have ADHD. No, they have PTSD because they are traumatized by what they are seeing in the home. I read a statistic that said the other day, from the year of 2008 and 2011, we're talking 3 years here, there was 6,000 plus military personnel suffering from PTSD. Within those same years, there was 11,583 people suffering from PTSD from domestic violence. Twice as much as those in the military who have experienced war.
Wow.
How serious it is. And this is why we do these Zooms and we do these lives. And this is why we share our stories and we talk about it, because it is the silent killer. Because nobody probably would in a million years think that more people suffer from domestic violence than our military personnel suffering from PTSD in war.
Wow. And it's unfortunate because a lot of the victims, they don't really receive the help because it's a lot of shame behind it and a lot of embarrassment. And so those traumas just stay within, and a lot of times those things are passed down on, or they continue to stay in that cycle of abusive relationship, even if they get with someone else. That's another pattern that we see as well. But
I posted, and every day I'm posting something about domestic violence. And I made a post last week, and a young lady came on my page, and she said, "Well, pretty much these women don't want help, and if they want help, they would go and get help. So I've just drawn the conclusion that they like it. And I'm just really trying to be nice, because I'm like, okay.
Right.
Hey, but I did say to her, I said, I want you to understand something. If that victim, I said, I want you to think about the person who's close to you that you know dealing with this, because we all know somebody who's dealing with it. And they are as close as our right hand is to our face. We know someone who's dealing with it. How we choose to respond to that person who's dealing with it is a whole new, a different issue. But I said to her, I want you to think about the person that you know who's dealing with this. And I want you to think about, if that person leaves right now, at this very moment, would you be able to offer her a safe place? And not just her, because I want you guys to think about my story. We're talking about, my mother had 4 children. My brother was away at my dad's house, spending the night. Spending the night. And even though he was not there, my brother had to grow up his entire life. He's now 50. But he grew up his entire life, and he just decided 2 years ago to even begin to talk about it.
Wow.
But you said to me, and my thing was, you weren't there, so you can't be as hurt or traumatized as we were, because, boy, you wasn't there. And he said, Pam, you don't understand. All these years, I've had to fight and struggle with the fact that I was not there, because maybe I could have done something.
Yeah.
It affects the children. I'm telling you, it was as if though, and I think it would be a fair assumption to say for all 4 of us, it was as if though we died that night. Every time she was hit, it felt as if though I was hit. It felt like I was wearing a black eye. That's just how painful this thing was. And if I was feeling pain like this, and not even the one that was being hit, imagine what she felt. But for us, it was like, we all died. We all died that night, and we all had to, my mom's in heaven, she's in glory now, and she's living the best life that she could possibly live. But for my siblings and I, we now have to figure out, what do we do? Is there life after Rebecca? What does life after Rebecca look like?
How did the murder of your mother impact not only you, but as well as your siblings? But you pretty much, you kind of, touched on that, but can you kind of go further? Like, did it affect your future relationships? Did you find yourself in a cycle of domestic violence as well, whether it's emotional or other aspects? It doesn't always have to be physical. Did you ever experience being with narcissistic men? And did you see that in your sisters or brothers as well?
I did. And so we all took like different paths. My brother, he chose a path of alcohol, so he would drink a lot. My youngest sister, it just seemed like every relationship that she was in was a DV relationship. And, I've received their approval to say stuff like this, and I would never say it without their approval. But every relationship, it seemed like she was having to fight. I was being called to go and get her, and and it had gotten to the point, Millicent, where her relationships were so bad that every time I would see a number pop up on my phone that had a 704 area code, which was our area code, I knew my sister was dead. I knew that my sister was dead. In the middle of the night, I'm getting these calls, and it, again, the PTSD, the triggers, and it's almost like having to relive what we went through. But it just seemed like everything that I would say to her, do you know what this does? It was like she wasn't listening until she finally decided to listen. My oldest sister became a minister of the gospel. So, she does that. But she's very reserved and very timid and until she's preaching. That's like a whole nother person takes over. But we all went down different paths, but it affected all of us in so many ways. I hated everybody. I'm just going to be honest. I grew up and I hated everybody. I hated my family because they weren't there. And I felt that if my mom's mother would have helped more, that maybe she would still be alive. Like, I hated our neighbor because when we ran to her house, she pushed us off her porch that night and, just said she didn't want to have anything to do with it. So I grew up with a lot of hate and animosity for everybody. So when I went into a relationship, I was probably the abuser because I was not going to allow what happened to my mom happen to me. And so when I saw anything close to it, I immediately shut it down. So I'm quite sure that I've lost some good relationships and some good friendships because of that. But I didn't know how to deal with it. Think about it. At the age of 10 and 9 and 8 and 6, your very first experience with death is your mother. The only person who has ever held you in her arms and said to you that she loves you, said to you that you're a pretty girl, said to you how pretty your dimples were, complimented you, showed you any type of love, is now gone. And nobody can really explain to you why, because you're confused. All the other times that he stabbed her, she came back. All the other times she was beaten, she came back. But now it's that your mom died. My dad tapped us the next day and woke us up. Pam, wake up. Your mom didn't make it. Your mom died, and walks out of the room.
Just like that.
Just like that.
Now, how old were you at the time?
I was 8. I was 8 years old. My mom was 27. 27. Yeah, we've all outlived her. 27 with 4 kids. Very young, very young. 4 kids. So that's why when people are saying, well, why Pam, why do these victims stay? Why don't they just leave? Where are you going to go with 4 kids?
Right.
Who do you know? I'm trying to sit here and think now, like even right now, I don't know anybody who is willing to welcome 5 people, you and 4 kids. Where was she going to go? So when the young lady said to me, well, they must like it. They don't leave. And I said to her, I said, honey, we've slept outside. I know what it's like to sleep on wet cardboard. I know what it's like to sleep on cold concrete. I know what it's like to stay up all night because you're thinking that some snake gonna crawl on you in the middle of the night while you're sleeping. I know what it's like to lay next to cows and they're mooing and all you can see is their eyes in the dark. Like, if I told you, we left plenty of times. But when you wake up that next morning and you don't have anywhere to go with these 4 kids, what do? You go back to what's familiar. Mama, and they got it wrong because we were hearing more from them that we heard them say to us more, don't go out of this house telling our business. Don't tell our business. Don't be going to that school telling them teachers my business. Even my mom said it to us a lot. What happens in this house stays in this house. How many of us has heard this?
Yeah.
So we grew up in an era where they were protecting those things. They were protecting the abuser. They were protecting the freaky uncle who was molesting children when they came over. They were protecting all of that, and you couldn't talk about any of those things. So it was like, who's going to help us? So all these years we had to grow up and nobody even wanted to talk about what happened. My whole life, Millicent, nobody ever asked me in my family, none of my mother's siblings, and she comes from a family of 12, I think. None of them ever sat us down to say, how are you guys doing this? We all went on. We graduated high school, went to college, and I just graduated with my 4th degree.
Yes. Congratulations.
Yeah, so I'm excited. But, I said all of that to say that these children, they need the support. That when we're turning that mother away, we're turning her children away. I can remember nights going to my grandmother's house, and people get mad when I say it, but it's what it is. Going to my mother's mother house with nothing on but a t-shirt and underwear, because he had put us out of the house, had beat her up and put us out of the house. t-shirt, underwear, and it was probably about 50, 60 degrees outside. Cold, freezing cold. And my grandmother had a huge picture window by her bed that she sat there and she would look out just to see everything. And she wouldn't let us in. She wouldn't let us in. So when people are asking you, why don't they just leave? You tell them that Pam said we left and my own grandmother wouldn't let us in.
And you know what? You guys also have to remember that most victims don't reach out because of things like this. Because when they do reach out, this is the level of support that they get. Absolutely none. And there has to be
none. We have to be accountable. We have to be supportive. We have to realize that it is your business. Yeah. It is. It's everybody's business because everybody is impacted and everybody is affected. And, it's like, I don't want to meet up with people at the funeral. And all these people that were coming to the house at the funeral, and my grandmother was like, go out there and y'all talk to those people. But why? Like, these are the people that I knew. You shut the door in our face. But now we're getting ready for this funeral and everybody is so sympathetic and empathetic and everybody want to hug Beck's girls, but nobody wanted to help Beck when she was living.
Now, Pam, you said that her murderer, that was her boyfriend, right? He stabbed her over 100 times, correct?
It was, yeah.
Okay. Now, did he serve time?
He did. And I'm going to shock you. You froze up on me a little bit. So let me shock you. And I didn't even find this out because it was don't talk about it, shut it down. So for years, we never talked about it. Growing up, like my sisters and I, we never talked about it. My brother, we never talked about it at all. And when I was probably about 30, someone said to me, they're going to be having a candlelight vigil in Anson County. And what they do at this vigil is they honor all of the people who were killed due to domestic violence. And so the lady that called me, she said, your mom's name is going to be on one of the silhouettes. Oh, okay. I'll go. And I went. And I don't know if you see, I post it every year. So it's actually my screensaver right now, what they have on there. This man killed my mom in front of us. When he was done, he picked her up. He drug her through the house, Millicent. He threw her on the back porch. He covered her up in trash and clothes and hid her well because it took hours to find her. He did all of that. He was sentenced to 3 years. He served 1.
Get out of here. Unbelievable.
3 years. Not even for murder, for manslaughter. I read that on the silhouette and it was as if though my heart stopped all over again. It was like her life meant nothing. It meant nothing. He served 1 year.
Wow, you are strong, you're beautiful, and I commend you for your strength. Have you gone to therapy outside of what they put you in when you were younger? Did you ever go back as an adult?
I did. I had to. Because I was wondering why I didn't have friends, why I couldn't, be in a steady relationship. And one of my supervisors at one of the companies that I worked for said, I think you need to go to therapy. I think it'll help. And if you go to therapy, I'll pay for it for you. Like, oh, I just want to go and just lay on the couch because, I've seen on the TV shows and the movies where these people have fun and And it was life-changing. It was life-changing for me. And I'm so glad that I went, and I would recommend that anyone who needs to talk to someone, go. Anyone who's dealing with some stuff, that they go. That therapy is not just for crazy people, as you know, Big Mama them taught us to believe. But their therapy was so helpful for me. And it helped me to realize so much about myself, because it helped me to deal with the hurt. It helped me to deal with the pain. And after I dealt with all of that, it helped me to figure out, now what do I do with all of this? Where do I go now? How do I help someone else? What is my next step? And it was like, oh, okay. Yeah, this is cool.
Yeah.
So yes, therapy, highly recommended.
Awesome. One last question. What final words do you have for women out there who are in an abusive relationship? And maybe they haven't told anyone, maybe it's secret, maybe, they've kept it silent, but they have children and children are watching. What final words of advice do you have for those women out there?
First and foremost, I want them to know that there is help available, and it may not be in the form of your family or your friends, but there's some amazing organizations out here. There's some amazing people like Millicent, myself, who really do care, who really want to get you the help that you need, because we know and we understand that it's not easy. It's not easy to leave. It's not easy to stay there and endure it. So I want them to know that there is help. I want them to know that there are people available that they can talk to. And I trust that you're going to post the 1-800-799-SAFE number that they can call. I want them to know that it normally don't get better, that this person normally don't just change. We hope for the better, but take it for what it is. If they are abusive, if they're controlling, if they're isolating you, look for the red flags. Are they telling you what to do with your cell phone? Are they telling you who you can and cannot talk to? Are they telling you what you can and cannot wear? Are they abusive to your children? Are they abusive to your pets? Do they control all of the finances? Do they control where you go to church? Do they control just about everything that there is about you that can be controlled? If so, you are in an abusive relationship, and we want to help you. We want to help you get out. We don't recommend, let me just say this because people for some reason miss it. The worst time for a victim is when she has left or she's trying to leave, because the abuser don't want to give up that control. So for those of you who may be thinking about leaving, who may be ready to leave, talk to us. Call the 799-SAFE number and help you come up with a safety plan, because planning is so important when you are in a domestic violence relationship. Your children are watching, and they're either going to mimic what you're doing. They're going to mimic, your girls are going to mimic your behavior. Boys tend to mimic the abuser behavior, and it's not healthy. They're dealing with this, and they are crying out on the inside for you. They're crying out for themselves. They're probably acting out in school, and you can't figure out why your sweet baby is acting like this. It's because all they're learning is violence. And we got to teach them the difference between healthy relationships and unhealthy relationships. But in order to do that, there has to be some changes made.
Absolutely, absolutely. And remember, guys, we are all connected. And so, thank you, Pamela. Oh, one more thing. How can survivors follow you on social media if they have any questions, if they want to reach out to you, if you don't mind?
So I know my Facebook handle, and I'm a Facebook avid Facebooker. And so my girls is like, nobody uses Facebook anymore. So I'm trying to get into Twitter and Instagram and all this other stuff, but I keep forgetting to check it. But if you can reach at Facebook, I'm Pamela Ann. That simple, just Pamela Ann. Send me a message, and we'll help you figure this out and figure out, hook you up and get some contacts and try to get you out of this situation and try to help you through it. so that you can survive and you can thrive all at the same time. But I'm Pamela Ann on Facebook. Instagram, I am Rebecca's Kid 5 or 4. Try both of them, y'all. I really don't know. But if they can reach you, Millicent can reach me, and because we're connected. You know, she's on one side of the world, I'm on the other side, but you know, we're still connected. So if you can get to her, you can get to me.
Yes, and we will be posting these numbers for the National Domestic Violence Hotline and all of that at the end of this video. One of the major obstacles for victims of faith, and the most used argument believers use for staying with an abusive husband, is the biblical concept of submission. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 22 through 24 states, "Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything." Church leaders should also look at the verses that both precede and follow, starting with Ephesians chapter 5, verses 22 through 24. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Submission among all Christians is meant to be mutual and an act of respect to Christ. Ephesians chapter 5:25 states, "Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her." Christ's love for the church was a sacrificial love, which resulted in the ultimate act of submission, his choice to die. Christ gave up his own desires for the benefit of his church. This is the kind of love the Bible instructs a husband to have for his wife. In Colossians chapter 3, verses 19, which states, "Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them." A further mandate to husbands is for them to be respectful and appropriate in their behavior towards their wives. These are the characteristics of a husband to whom the Bible instructs wives to submit. Someone who is gentle and sacrificial in their love towards their wives. If a husband is abusive to his wife, he is being disobedient to God. And according to scriptures, Matthew 18, verses 15 through 17, the husband should be held accountable by the church. If your brother sins against you, go and show him his fault, just between the two of you. If he listens to you, you have won your brother over. But if he will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church, and if he refuses to listen even to the church, treat him as you would a pagan or tax collector. So submission is not a husband's superiority or domination over his wife. Submission is not blind obedience of a wife to her husband. Submission is not the implication that a wife is less valued by God. And submission is not the obligation on the part of a spouse to be beaten, threatened, and humiliated by her partner.
First, I would say to a person who finds themselves in a domestic violence situation, not to keep the abuse a secret. Share what you are going through with a family member or a friend, somebody you can trust. And then try to get counseling or support from domestic violence ministry or a support group. And there are many out there. And this will make a big difference in helping you to see what your first, second, and third steps might be.
Things that I would say that I would suggest to women of faith and men as well is that as was said by Bishop Starnes, don't keep it a secret. Reach out to someone close, someone that you have respect for, someone that you feel like you can really talk to such as our leaders. And I do understand that sometimes leaders themselves are targets for domestic violence, and they go through this. But leaderships, pastors, reach out to your class leaders. You know, in A.M.S church, we have the class leaders who you might feel comfortable to reach out to. As Bishop Starnes said, other organizations outside of the body of Christ, which specialize in domestic violence, should be considered. I think it's a much safer place for individuals when you do reach out to these organizations. I think it's safer for the abuser and for the one they're confining in, and keeping yourself safe and keeping yourself safe as a leader is very important, because the domestic violence is can really be difficult and challenging thing to experience. It keeps, it's just smart to reach out to those who you feel like you can talk to.
Well, concerning abuse, Colossians chapter 3, verse 19, and I'm reading from the New Living Translation, says, husbands, love your wives and never treat them harshly. And this applies to all domestic relationships, whether it's girlfriend, boyfriend, whether it's parent, child. We should never treat people harshly. And then concerning verbal abuse, it says in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29, again from the New Living Translation, don't use foul and abusive language. Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. And then I want to say one more thing, what the Bible says to victims of abuse and violence. Psalm 72, verses 12 through 14 from the New Living Translation says, he will rescue the poor when they cry to him. He will help the oppressed who have no one to defend them. He feels pity for the weak and the needy, and he will rescue them. He will redeem them from oppression and violence, for their lives are precious to him. It is never God's will for any person to be abused sexually, verbally, or physically, and that there are times when a spouse, whether man or woman who's being abused, may need to separate, and if there's no change, divorce might be an option.
Have never experienced domestic abuse, and I'm grateful for that. So it's hard for you to speak about something that you've never really experienced, but I don't remember a time now. I do understand that in my life I have been talked down to, but that's not domestic abuse. But I had to deal with that. I had to ask God to help me to forgive in order to move on. But I would say domestic, I have not experienced that.
I have experienced domestic violence.
Yes.
Early in my life, My father was an alcoholic, and when we were very young, when he would get drunk, he was violent, and he would, in that state, he would, be violent with us, my brother, my sister, and myself, but especially with my mother. And it got so bad that my mother had to, once she survived the last episode, we had to leave. We were living in Spain at that time. My father was in the Air Force, and we had to begin to come to the States and live with my grandparents, and we were raised with our grandparents. Mm-hmm. So, yes, I early on in my years, the first 8 or 9 years of my life, that was our life, and so yes, I have. To survivors, I would say that you are a living testimony, and I guess I should say I am too, of how God can bring someone through domestic violence. And I think that the key is, as Sister Starnes alluded to any kind of violence, verbal, physical, emotional, sexual, is the forgiveness that Christ enables us to practice, not for the sake of our abuser, but for our own sake. And that forgiveness allows that hurt, that depression, the scarring to be released and the healing to take place. I would also say that as God opens the door of opportunity, it's important for us to share our story with others, because there are many people right now who are trapped in domestic violence and may think that there's no way out of it. And when we share our stories, it lets them know that there is a way. And there's a way not only to get out of the situation, but to get the situation out of us. We can leave the situation, but the pain and hurt and anger inside, that also can be released, and God can bring healing. And then if I may, I also would ask that you consider initiating or at least participating in domestic violence ministries, those who have survived. It's important to share in those ministries. This can be a means of helping others, but it also can continue our own healing by being in a support group or even initiating one.
I was just sitting here thinking and praying and asking God to direct me and show me what to say. And he took me to Psalm 147, verse 3. And it says that he heals the brokenhearted and bandages their wounds. So that lets me know that only Jesus can do some things for us. Only Jesus can heal the wounds left by an abuser. And if we open up our hearts to him and allow him to just give him a chance to come in and be our Savior, then he can heal. He can begin the healing process of abuse. Because abuse is mistreatment of others, and we know that the Lord is not pleased when we mistreat others. And so I would say that be encouraged to know that give Jesus a chance, give God a chance at healing our wounds. Absolutely. Thank you.
Why does prevention matter? Well, prevention matters because it keeps you and your family safe. You actually lessen the chances of being in an abusive relationship, period, or even being injured when you practice prevention. You prevent abuse by, number one, paying attention to red flags. For a lot of us, we don't want to think to the extreme. And I understand it's not fear-mongering. It's just using wisdom. So paying attention to red flags, paying attention to the God's voice, he gives us that voice. He gives us that tug for our protection because he loves us. So that's the number one way to prevent it. Number 2 is asking the right questions. Number 3, creating boundaries. Creating boundaries help you stay safe. I remember there was a time in my life when I had no boundaries at all. I didn't have boundaries for the one I loved. In fact, I was proud to be a ride or die, right? Y'all remember they used to talk about that in songs growing up in the 90s about being a ride or die? And I was proud to be the one that would do whatever it took to make my partner happy. However, I was unaware that was pretty toxic, and it led an open door for narcissistic, psychopathic, and abusive males to rob my esteem, my value, and worth. And they didn't value me. They didn't, because I didn't set the bar for myself. So setting boundaries tells the other person how far they can go with you. And now it doesn't matter if you've known this person for 20 years. It doesn't matter if this is your divine counterpart that God blessed you with. You have, or you should, develop boundaries, because it's human nature to test the limits. And, you just want to make sure that you keep yourself safe as well as your family. Last but not least, before I go to number 4, let's go back on boundaries, because I there's a few. I want to give you guys some examples of unhealthy boundaries. So a list is noticing when someone invades your. Not noticing when someone invades your boundaries is a form of unhealthy boundaries. Telling all your stuff. You are supposed to communicate with your partner, but just telling it all. Get to know someone, but be very mindful of that. Acting on the first sexual impulse. Falling in love with someone who reaches out. Falling in love with a new acquaintance quickly. Accepting sex that you don't want. Having sex and doing the things that you don't really want to do, but you're just doing it for your partner. Now there's, when you become married and things like that, it's okay to make certain sacrifices, but you also don't want to go outside of your boundaries and end up doing things, because we see this a lot with the human trafficking. That's how a lot of women get involved in that, because their boyfriends traffic them, and those women don't want to be out there selling their bodies for money, but they haven't developed the boundaries or assertiveness to say no. And so sexual and physical abuse is a form of not having healthy boundaries. And so let's look at a list of healthy boundaries I'm going to go through with you guys. Moving step by step into intimacy is a healthy boundary. Revealing a little of yourself at a time, then checking to see how the other person responds to you sharing, instead of, just throwing it all out there. Noticing when someone else displays inappropriate boundaries is a form of practicing healthy boundaries. Being sexual when you want to be, instead of just doing it out of instead of just doing it for the other person only. Self-respect, not giving too much in hope that someone will like you. Not allowing, this is healthy boundaries now, not allowing someone to take advantage of your generosity. And recognizing that friends and partners are not mind readers. Communication, being able to speak. And so these are things that are important. And I thought that I just added a few examples for you guys. So last but not least, taking action. So it may be hard to take action, especially if your emotions and feelings are invested. But once you begin to notice red flags, the past history of abuse, the disrespect of your boundaries, now you need to move forward. When we ignore those things, those voices that God gives us, we're putting ourselves in harm's way. If God is telling you to move forward from a relationship, if God is giving you the warning and then is telling you to move forward from that guy or for whoever it is, it's important that you be obedient to the Father and do it. Finally ready to go, you recognize you're in a dangerous situation and you fear for your life. Maybe you don't have the support from your friends and family. Maybe he controls all the money, etc. But you don't know what steps to take. So the first thing I want you guys to remember is that it's not your fault. It doesn't matter what you did. It doesn't matter what you said. You did not deserve to be abused. Do not blame yourself for it. 2, the second thing you must do, document everything. If he hits you, threatens you, record it. Most phones have an audio recorder. Record everything you possibly can. Of course, keep your things private. Don't let him know, but take pictures. If he hits you, take pictures. Do videos. Do a video journal. Write a journal. Write it down. Because those are the things that you're gonna need. God forbid if you have to go to court, if you're dealing with child custody, or if you want a restraining order. Those are the things that's gonna help you get the highest order of protection that you can possibly get. Number 3, pack an emergency bag. Pack a bag of clothing, money, medications, birth certificates, social security numbers, all the important stuff, and store it at a neighbor's house or store it at your job. Take it somewhere that it's very safe, that your abuser won't know where it is. 3, save money. Get you a separate account. Don't let them know. Another type of abuse that comes along with domestic abuse is financial abuse. A lot of abusers have full control over the money. Create your own money, create your own account, and save it as much as you can so that you can use that for when you're ready to leave. Last but not least, develop a trusting support circle. Now look, this is really touchy and it can be hard for victims. So find you someone that's not connected to your abuser and let them know what's going on so that you will have the proper support when you're feeling like you want to go back. You can have that proper support. Even when you're ready to get out and you're ready to go, you want to make sure it's somebody that's in your circle that's not going to go back to your abuser and tell them what you're planning to do. But that is very important to your success. So before we end this, I need you to know that when you're ready to leave, whatever you do, do not tell your partner that you're planning to leave. There are plenty of local shelters for survivors of domestic abuse. You can literally pack your things with nothing, maybe a handful of clothes, and go across the country. And there's programs all over the United States where they can house you and your children. You guys can have your own apartment rent-free, and you can have everything that you need to start a new beginning. But you got to understand that if you reach out back to your abuser, that's when you're going to be you're putting yourself more in harm. Don't allow him or her to make excuses for what they did. And you're moving, just move in silence, okay? This means do not take him back no matter what your abuser says, because they're gonna come back. That's what they do. And so if one of you out there have all of these signs, or if you've experienced any of these things that we talked about this evening, and you know that this person could potentially abuse you, then I'm here to help you, okay? Now, if you would like to have a free safety plan, you can contact me. Let me pull it up. You can contact me at 414-676-5177. I thank you all for tuning in to this impactful documentary. I pray that it will be a blessing to you. And remember to share this with as many people as you possibly can. And I thank you. Remember that God loves you, and I love you too.
It is said by Ann Hawks in a very familiar hymn, I need thee every hour. And certainly based upon what has been shared today, all know from the presentations that there are persons who need God every day in a special way because of domestic violence, and with what rapidity and rapidness it is happening in our communities. So let us pray. Loving God, we ask that you would be with all men and women who are in doubt about their relationships. Lord, give them clarity of mind and peaceful hearts so that they can make good decisions guided by your love. Understanding, oh God, that anybody who has to abuse them does not love them, but rather you show us genuine love by taking care of us and providing for us. Let those who must acknowledge that they are harming others so that they will learn to abhor their own behavior and come to true repentance in this life. God, my prayer tonight is that you would keep all of us safe. And Lord, help those who have not come to that understanding that they are abusers to come to that understanding, and people will be better because of it. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for taking care of us. Thank you for being with us in every hour of our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
It was 1999 when things hit a turn for me. It was the year a classmate stole a special part of me. At 14, he abused me, took something so sweet, didn't have the courage to keep fighting him dirty. That part of me was rare as a ruby, a mystery, precious as a trophy. I longed for the day to save it for the special one that loved me, my future hubby, but I was disgraced, shamed, felt disgusting for speaking out. See, everyone judged me. I was afraid, but I pulled up the courage to tell somebody close to me. Felt like death, nobody believed me, bleeding, depressed, but all alone I began to question myself, feeling soft but empty. So I did the best I could and decided to put everything that happened behind me into the sea of forgetfulness. No more distress, emptiness. I reached out into the horizon for a brighter future, unaware that what followed me was a repeated cycle of the same dis-ease, rape, busted lips, domestic abuse, the dis-ease that attracted these demons to me. Pressed through alone, not recognizing that God was right there beside me. I became numb to life, numb to reality, numb to see that God did love me. I thought he left me. He never wanted anyone to hurt me. 20 years later, I'd see the truth. He came to set me free. And he told me that he wanted to use me to help women that were just like me. They were lied on, labeled as trash, dumb, and nasty. He said that if I had faith in him, he'd transform my life and promised to send my divine partner to me on a bended knee. Once I allowed God to show me the true value he said was deep inside of me. They aren't trash. They are diamonds in the rough, set to be queens just like Esther. I'll bless you, not another jester. You're set for a king. So remember, you aren't what they labeled you to be. Instead of doubt, just ask the number one queen.